The first time Adrian Wells realized his wife was gone, he wasn't standing in a courtroom, he wasn't holding divorce papers, and he certainly wasn't mourning the end of his marriage. He was stepping off a private jet at Newark with another woman wrapped around his arm. The Caribbean sun still clung to his skin. His expensive linen shirt smelled faintly of salt water and designer cologne. For 2 weeks he had ignored every phone call from home. 2 weeks of champagne breakfasts, private beaches, sunset cruises, and nights spent in a villa that cost more than most Americans earned in a year. Standing beside him, Brielle laughed as she slid her sunglasses onto her head. "You know," she teased, "if every business trip looked like this, I'd never complain again." Adrian smirked. "Then maybe I'll schedule more." She leaned up and kissed his cheek without caring who saw. A few travelers glanced their way. Some recognized Adrian Wells, CEO of Wells Meridian Capital, one of Wall Street's fastest-rising investment firms, a man featured on magazine covers as the very image of discipline, vision, and family values. Family values. The irony would have been funny if anyone knew the truth. Because while cameras praised him as a devoted husband, his wife had gone into labor alone more than 600 miles away. No husband, no comforting hand, no whispered encouragement, only fluorescent hospital lights and nurses asking over and over, "Is the baby's father on his way?" She stopped answering after the third time. Outside the terminal, Adrian's longtime executive assistant, Devon, opened the back door of the black Escalade. "Welcome home, sir." The luggage disappeared into the trunk. The SUV rolled toward Manhattan. Brielle was already scrolling through Instagram. Then she frowned. "Seriously?" Adrian barely looked up. "What now?" "Some idiot commented under my vacation photos." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "They said, 'Isn't your boyfriend's wife supposed to be giving birth this week?'" Silence for the first time all morning. Adrian reached for his phone. The screen lit up. 26 missed calls. Most were from his mother, a handful from the family office, none from Adeline. He frowned. That wasn't like her. She always called, always texted, always apologized even when she'd done nothing wrong. Strange. He checked the calendar. His expression barely changed. Brielle asked casually, "Did she have the baby?" Adrian locked the phone. "Probably. That's it. My mother's handling everything." He looked back out the window as if discussing quarterly earnings instead of the birth of his first child. "It doesn't require me." The SUV continued through New York traffic. Neither of them noticed Devon watching silently through the rearview mirror. He had worked beside Adrian for 11 years. He'd watched billion-dollar deals, corporate wars, economic crashes. But somehow that single sentence disturbed him more than all of them. "It doesn't require me." 30 minutes later, after dropping Brielle at her penthouse, Adrian changed directions. "Take me to Greenwich." "The estate." "Yes, sir." When he arrived, his mother greeted him exactly as expected. Not with congratulations, not with pictures of her grandson, not with joy. Instead, she adjusted the collar of his shirt and smiled. "I'm glad you're finally home." Only after tea had been poured, only after asking about his vacation, did she finally mention it. "Oh. Adeline had the baby." Adrian nodded once. "Boy or girl?" "A boy." "Healthy?" "Yes." Another nod. Nothing more. No smile, no excitement, no curiosity. Just business. Then came the only question that actually interested him. "Did she sign the divorce papers?" Cordelia's smile faded. "No." "Why not?" "She insisted the papers come from you." Adrian let out a quiet laugh. Still pretending she has a choice. Cordelia lowered her voice. "She thinks giving birth gives her leverage." Adrian stood. "I'll handle it." He grabbed his car keys. "I'll bring the baby home." "And Adeline?" He paused only long enough to answer. "She'll receive a generous settlement." Then he walked away as if ending a contract, not a marriage. 40 minutes later, the elevator doors opened inside an exclusive postpartum recovery center, room 412. He knocked. No answer. Silence. The door wasn't locked. Inside the room was spotless. The bed had already been remade. The closet stood empty. No baby blanket, no flowers, no photographs, nothing. It looked less like someone had checked out and more like they had erased every trace of ever existing. A nurse appeared behind him carrying fresh linens. She froze. "You must be Mr. Wells." Where's my wife? Confusion crossed her face. You don't know. His stomach tightened for reasons he couldn't explain. Know what? Mrs. Wells checked out almost 2 weeks ago. Everything inside him went still. Where did she go? I don't know. Who picked her up? A black sedan. And the baby? She looked at him strangely. Of course she took her son. Adrian's voice hardened. My son. The nurse didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her uniform pocket. Before she left, she asked me to give you this. A plain white envelope. No name, no address, only one sentence written neatly across the front. For Adrian. He opened it. Inside were divorce papers already signed. And beneath them a small flash drive. No explanation, just another handwritten note. Adrian, by the time you hear my voice, you'll finally understand why losing me was the cheapest mistake you'll ever make. Adrian didn't open the flash drive. Not immediately. He slipped it back into the envelope, folded the divorce papers once and handed everything to Devon. Take this. Devon looked surprised. Sir, shouldn't you at least? I'll deal with it later. His voice was flat, clinical, the same tone he used when approving layoffs or rejecting acquisition offers. Whatever Adeline had left behind, it could wait. She always waited for him. As Adrian walked back toward the elevator, the nurse called after him. Mr. Wells. He stopped without turning around. Your wife stayed here for 8 days. Silence. She had complications after delivery. He nodded once. I'll have my assistant settle any outstanding bills. The nurse stared at him, almost speechless. That wasn't what I meant. But the elevator doors had already closed. Back at Wells Meridian Capital, nothing had changed. Trading screens flashed green across the executive floor. Analysts hurried between conference rooms. Phones rang without stopping. Adrian stepped into the boardroom precisely at 1 o'clock. Let's begin. No one mentioned the baby. No one mentioned Adeline. They discussed quarterly earnings, private equity acquisitions, a pending merger worth nearly $340 million. For the next 4 hours, Adrian was completely focused. He negotiated, questioned, calculated exactly as he always had. When the meeting finally ended, the board chairman clapped him lightly on the shoulder. Congratulations. Adrian looked confused. For what? The baby. Oh. He gave a polite smile. Thank you. Nothing more. Watching him walk away, one director quietly whispered to another, does he even know his son's birthday? Adeline used to joke that she had married Wall Street itself. The market always came first. Clients came second. Investors came third. Everything else competed for whatever time remained. When they first met 7 years earlier, none of that had bothered her. Adrian wasn't rich yet. Wells Meridian Capital occupied only one rented office floor in Midtown. There were just 12 employees. He worked until midnight because he had to, not because he wanted to. Back then, Adeline admired his ambition. She remembered bringing sandwiches to the office because he kept forgetting to eat. She remembered helping him proofread investor presentations. She remembered staying awake beside him while he built financial models that eventually convinced his first institutional client. Whenever Adrian thanked her, he always said the same thing. One day none of this will matter. We'll finally have our life. She believed him every single time. Success arrived faster than anyone expected. One client became 10. 10 became 50. Wells Meridian Capital exploded. Magazine interviews, television appearances, awards, private clubs, political fundraisers. Money changed everything around Adrian except his schedule. He simply became unavailable in more luxurious places. Instead of missing dinner because he was in the office, he missed dinner because he was flying to London. Instead of canceling anniversaries for investor meetings, he canceled them for international conferences. Whenever Adeline complained, he always had the perfect answer. I'm doing this for us. Eventually she stopped arguing. 3 years into their marriage, Adeline quietly resigned from her own career. Not because Adrian asked, but because someone had to keep a home that Adrian was never inside long enough to notice. She managed renovations, paid household staff, remembered birthdays, sent gifts to clients' wives, hosted charity galas, and attended networking dinners, smiling beside a husband who spent most evenings talking to everyone except her. The newspapers called them New York's perfect power couple. Only Adeline knew how often she ate dinner alone. Everything changed the day she told Adrian she was pregnant. She had imagined dozens of different reactions. Shock, laughter, tears. Instead he checked his calendar. When? She blinked. 12 weeks. No. He shook his head. When are you due? Early October. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Damn. What? The Singapore summit. She laughed awkwardly. You can always skip one conference. He looked genuinely surprised. You know I can't. That was the first crack. A tiny one, almost invisible. But once glass begins to crack, it never returns to what it was before. The pregnancy became something Adeline experienced largely by herself. Doctor appointments, ultrasounds, parenting classes. She attended nearly all of them alone. Adrian always had another meeting, another investor, another emergency. Whenever he did manage to appear, he stayed exactly long enough to take photographs. The pictures always reached social media. Family first. Blessed beyond words. Can't wait to meet our son. Thousands of people clicked the heart button. Only Adeline knew those captions had been written by Wells Meridian's public relations team. Devon noticed everything. Executive assistants always do. One evening, while organizing Adrian's travel schedule, he hesitated. Sir. What? Mrs. Wells has another appointment Friday. I'll be in Miami. I know. Devon paused carefully. It's the anatomy scan. Adrian kept typing. Reschedule it. Devon looked down. Sir, that's not really how pregnancy works. Adrian finally stopped. For a brief second, something resembling guilt crossed his face. Then his phone buzzed. One glance at the screen and everything disappeared. Book me on the earlier flight. Yes, sir. Devon quietly closed the calendar. There are moments when employees stop respecting their bosses. Not because they're demanding, but because they witness the kind of choices no title can justify. 7 months into the pregnancy, another person entered Adrian's life. Brielle Vance, Vice President of Brand Strategy. Brilliant, beautiful, fearlessly ambitious. She challenged him during meetings, matched his sarcasm, and worked the same impossible hours. Within weeks, business dinners became private dinners. Private dinners became weekend travel. Weekend travel became hotel reservations that never appeared on the company's official expense reports. No one confronted him, not directly. Wall Street had always forgiven powerful men faster than ordinary ones. Devon saw the receipts. The drivers noticed the addresses. Hotel staff remembered familiar faces. People always knew. They simply pretended not to. Adeline found out by accident. Not through photographs, not through lipstick on a collar, not through gossip. Adrian had accidentally forwarded an airline confirmation to their shared email account. 2 first-class tickets. Destination Street, Lucia. Departure date October 3rd, the same week her doctor expected the baby to arrive. She stared at the screen for almost 5 minutes, waiting for some logical explanation. A business assistant, a client, anyone. Then she looked at the second passenger's name. Brielle Vance. For a long time Adeline didn't cry. She simply closed the laptop, walked into the nursery, and quietly folded tiny baby clothes until the sun came up. The following morning, Adrian left for the airport before she woke. He kissed her forehead. Try to get some rest. She smiled. I will. Neither of them mentioned St. Lucia. Neither of them mentioned Brielle. Sometimes the most painful lies are the ones both people silently agree not to discuss. 3 days later, Adeline went into labor alone. And while her contractions came closer together, her husband was watching the sunset from a private beach more than 1,500 miles away. By the second day in St. Lucia, Adrian had almost forgotten his wife was due to give birth. Not because he had meant to, but because forgetting had become a habit. Every hour of his vacation had been carefully designed to keep reality far away. Morning swims, luxury brunches overlooking the ocean, afternoons aboard a chartered yacht, evening cocktails beneath strings of lanterns swaying in the tropical breeze. Whenever his phone buzzed, he barely glanced at it before putting it face down again. Work? Brielle asked as they sat beside the infinity pool. Hi, mother. You should answer. Adrian shrugged. If it's important, she'll leave a message. She smiled and leaned against his shoulder. I like this version of you. What version? The one who actually relaxes. He laughed. I've earned it. Neither of them realized that nearly 1,500 miles away, Adeline was timing her contractions with the stopwatch on her phone. The first contraction came just after midnight. At first she thought it was another false alarm. Her doctor had warned her the final weeks could be unpredictable. She breathed slowly, walked around the apartment and drank a glass of water. 20 minutes later, another contraction hit harder. She looked at the empty side of the bed. Adrian had been gone for 3 days. The room suddenly felt much larger than usual. She picked up her phone. His contact photo still showed the two of them smiling at a charity gala the year before. She pressed call. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Then she texted. I think it's time. Please call me when you can. He stared at the screen. Nothing. Cordelia Wells answered on the first ring. Adeline. I think I'm in labor. There was a brief pause. How far apart? About 15 minutes. I'll send a driver. No. Adeline looked toward the nursery. I'll call the rideshare. Nonsense. Cordelia's voice remained perfectly calm. The family car is already on the way. Exactly 23 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up outside the townhouse. The driver loaded her hospital bag into the trunk without saying much. Halfway to Manhattan, Adeline looked out the window and quietly asked, Did Adrian call? The driver hesitated. I'm sorry, Mrs. Wells. I don't know. She nodded. I understand. It was the last time she asked. The delivery lasted almost 11 hours. Long enough for 3 different nursing shifts. Long enough for the doctor to ask repeatedly whether anyone from her family was coming. Long enough for Adeline to stop expecting the answer to change. When her son finally cried for the first time, she cried too. Not because of the pain, not because she felt abandoned. Because in that tiny cry, she suddenly understood she would never again have the luxury of pretending everything was fine. The nurse carefully placed the baby against her chest. He's beautiful. Adeline smiled through exhausted tears. He looks like his father. The nurse looked around the room. Will your husband be arriving soon? Adeline kissed the baby's forehead. I honestly don't know. The next morning, photographs of Adrian appeared online. A business blogger had spotted him dining on the beach. He and Brielle were laughing over breakfast. The headline spread quickly. Wells Meridian CO enjoys tropical getaway before becoming a father. One of the younger nurses accidentally saw it while scrolling through her phone. She looked from the article to Adeline holding her newborn alone, then quietly locked her screen. Some stories didn't require commentary. Adrian finally checked his voicemail that evening. 29 messages. He deleted most of them without listening. Then one caught his attention. It wasn't from his mother. It was Adeline. Her voice sounded surprisingly calm. Hi. I know you're busy. I just wanted you to know our son is here. Pause. He's healthy. You don't need to rush back. I just thought you deserved to know. The recording ended. Adrian stared at the phone for a moment. Brielle walked onto the balcony carrying 2 glasses of wine. Everything okay? He slipped the phone into his pocket. Yeah. Nothing urgent. And just like that, he chose not to call back. 3 days later, Cordelia arrived at the hospital carrying flowers that looked expensive enough to decorate a hotel lobby. She kissed the baby lightly. He has the Wells eyes. Adeline smiled politely. He does. Cordelia pulled a chair beside the bed. We should discuss something. Adeline already knew where the conversation was heading. The divorce. Cordelia folded her hands. Adrian doesn't think either of you has been happy for a long time. And he sent you to tell me. He thought this would be easier. Adeline looked down at her sleeping son. I carried his child for 9 months. I gave birth alone. And he couldn't even ask me himself. Cordelia sighed. Adeline, my son is under enormous pressure. So was I. Silence settled between them. Finally, Cordelia reached into her designer handbag and placed a thick envelope on the bedside table. Inside were divorce papers already prepared, already reviewed by lawyers, everything except Adeline's signature. Cordelia spoke gently, almost kindly. If you sign now, we can avoid unnecessary attention. Adeline didn't even touch the papers. Instead, she asked a single question. Has Adrian seen his son yet? Cordelia looked away. No. Then tell him this. Her voice remained calm. I'll sign nothing until he looks into his child's eyes. Cordelia stood slowly. You're making this harder than it needs to be. No, Adeline answered. I'm making him participate in the life he helped create. Cordelia picked up her purse. I'll let him know. As the door closed, Adeline finally reached for the envelope. She read every page carefully, not once but twice. Then she noticed something strange. One clause hadn't existed in the prenuptial agreement she remembered signing years earlier. It granted Adrian expanded control over several jointly held investment accounts. She frowned. That wasn't standard. Someone had quietly rewritten more than a marriage. They had rewritten the future. She folded the papers carefully and placed them back inside the envelope. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, she wasn't thinking like a heartbroken wife. She was thinking like a woman who had just discovered the first crack in something much bigger than infidelity. The next morning she made exactly one phone call. Not to Adrian, not to Cordelia, not to a divorce lawyer. She called someone she hadn't spoken to in almost 8 years. When the person answered, Adeline closed her eyes. Dad, I need your help. Silence filled the line. Then came a voice she never thought she would hear again. I've been waiting for you to call. The man on the other end did not ask who was calling. After 8 years of silence, Harrison Caldwell still recognized his daughter's voice. Where are you? He asked. At the hospital. Are you hurt? I had a baby. A long silence followed. Then his voice changed, not colder but softer. You have a child? Yes. And no one told me. Adeline looked down at her sleeping son. I didn't think I had the right. You always had the right. Her throat tightened. 8 years earlier she had walked away from the Caldwell family with one suitcase and enough anger to last a lifetime. She had rejected the family money, the guarded estate, the private drivers, and the expectations that came with being Harrison Caldwell's only daughter. Adrian had seemed like the opposite of that world. He was still building Wells Meridian Capital from a rented office then. He worked late, wore inexpensive suits, and spoke endlessly about creating something with his own hands. Her father had disliked him immediately. He doesn't love you, Harrison had warned. He loves the version of himself he sees through your eyes. Adeline had called him controlling. Then she married Adrian without a single member of her family attending. For years she told herself that sacrifice proved her love was real. Now she was lying in a hospital bed while Adrian vacationed with another woman. Dad, she whispered. I was wrong. We can discuss that later. A chair moved on his end of the line. Tell me what you need. I need help. You have it. I need someone I can trust. You still have that too. She closed her eyes. For the first time since labor began, she felt safe enough to breathe. Harrison sent her older brother, Sebastian. He arrived less than 40 minutes later in a charcoal suit, his expression controlled until he stepped into the room and saw her. Addie. No one had called her that in years. Sebastian crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her carefully. For several seconds neither of them spoke. Then he looked toward the bassinet. Is that my nephew? Adeline nodded. His name is Levi. Sebastian bent down and studied the baby's face. Where is Adrian? Adeline handed him her phone. The photographs from St. Lucia were still open. Adrian and Brielle sat together on a private beach, laughing over breakfast while Adeline had been in labor. Sebastian scrolled through the images once, then locked the phone. Where are the divorce papers? She pointed toward the bedside table. He read them in silence. His expression slowly hardened. This isn't just a divorce agreement. Adeline sat straighter. What is it? Sebastian tapped one of the clauses. This gives Adrian control over several investment interests still legally connected to you. I thought those belonged to him. You gave him management authority. You never transferred the underlying interest. Then why does he need my signature now? Because someone discovered those assets are still tied to your name. Adeline felt a cold pressure settle in her chest. Sebastian turned another page. If anything inside Wells Meridian Capital is over-leveraged or improperly reported, they may be trying to attach your approval to it before removing you. Cordelia's visit suddenly made sense. The soft voice, the pressure, the promise that signing would make everything easier. They were not only trying to end her marriage, they were trying to leave her holding part of the damage. Can you stop them? She asked. Sebastian pulled out his phone. I can slow them down. Within minutes he contacted the family attorney and placed temporary restrictions on the accounts linked to Adeline. He did not shout. He did not threaten anyone. He simply made 3 calls. And suddenly the people who believed Adeline had no power could no longer move without her knowing. That evening Sebastian brought her a laptop and a sealed folder. What is this? Everything we could find connected to your marriage and Wells Meridian Capital. Adeline began reading. Trust documents, old fund records, legal correspondence. Most of it was technical and dry. Then she saw an email sent 6 months earlier from Adrian to the firm's outside counsel. The subject line made her hand go still. Adeline exit strategy. She opened it. Adrian had asked how quickly his wife could be removed from the family's linked investment structure after the birth of their child. The attorney had replied, once the heir is delivered, the reputational risk should be manageable. Adeline read the sentence twice. Not baby. Not son. Sebastian watched her from across the room. Did you know about this? She shook her head. For years she had defended Adrian by telling herself he was careless, distracted, consumed by work. But this was not neglect. This was planning. He closed the laptop. When can Levi and I leave? Tonight. Where are we going? Home. The word hit her harder than she expected. That night, under a different registration name, Adeline left the hospital with her son in her arms. A Caldwell security team waited downstairs. No Wells driver, no family representative, no one controlling where she went next. As the car pulled away, she looked back at the hospital entrance. That was where Adrian had expected her to sign away her future. Instead, it became the place where she took it back. Sebastian sat beside her. What do you want to do now? Adeline looked down at Levi. First, I want the divorce. And after that she thought of the email, the hidden clause, the vacation photographs. Then she answered quietly. I want the truth about Wells Meridian Capital. Sebastian nodded. That truth may destroy Adrian. Adeline looked out at the city lights. No. Her voice was calm. Whatever he built will destroy him. She had spent years protecting Adrian from the consequences of his choices. That protection ended tonight. Adrian didn't return to New York until 4 days after Adeline left the hospital. By then he believed the hardest part would be convincing her to sign the divorce papers. He had no idea she was already gone. When he unlocked the front door of their townhouse, the silence felt strange. Usually Adeline's favorite jazz station played softly in the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee lingered in the mornings. There was always some sign that someone actually lived there. Today nothing. He walked upstairs. The nursery was empty. No crib, no blankets, no baby monitor. Even the framed ultrasound photo had disappeared from the shelf. His phone rang. It was his mother. Did you find her? Cordelia asked. No, I thought she would wait. Adrian frowned. She has nowhere else to go. Cordelia didn't answer immediately. I wouldn't be so sure. For the first time, a faint sense of unease settled over him. The next morning, Adrian arrived at Wells Meridian Capital, expecting another ordinary workday. Instead, Devon was already waiting outside his office. You have visitors. I don't remember scheduling anyone. They didn't ask for an appointment. Devon handed him a business card. Sebastian Caldwell, Chief Investment Officer, Caldwell Group. Adrian's expression changed. What does he want? He said you'll find out in person. Sebastian was standing beside the conference room window when Adrian entered. The 2 men had met only once years earlier. Neither had liked the other. Adrian forced a smile. Long time. Sebastian ignored the greeting. I'm here on Adeline's behalf. So she's hiding behind her family now. No. Sebastian calmly placed a folder on the table. She's protecting herself. Adrian opened it. Inside was a formal notice. Effective immediately, every investment connected to Adeline's personal interests had been frozen pending legal review. His smile disappeared. You can't do this. We already did. This affects my company. Sebastian met his eyes. Exactly. Adrian closed the folder harder than necessary. This is revenge. No, Sebastian replied evenly. It's called due diligence. For the rest of the day, Adrian barely left his office. His legal department confirmed the notice was valid. Several pending transactions had to be delayed. 2 lenders requested additional documentation. Nothing catastrophic. Yet still the timing couldn't have been worse. Wells Meridian Capital was preparing for the largest fundraising round in company history. Even a small delay could cost millions. Adrian finally called Adeline. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. Blocked. He stared at the screen in disbelief. She had never blocked him before. Never. That evening he drove to the Caldwell estate. Massive iron gates stood between the road and the mansion beyond. A security guard stepped outside before Adrian even reached the entrance. "I'm here to see Adeline." "I'm sorry, sir. She isn't receiving visitors." "I'm her husband." The guard didn't react. "Please turn the vehicle around." Adrian felt anger rising. "You can't keep me from seeing my own wife." A second guard approached. Neither man looked aggressive. Neither moved. They simply waited. For the first time in years, Adrian realized that his title meant absolutely nothing outside his own company. He drove away without seeing her. Inside the estate, Adeline watched his car disappear through the security cameras. Sebastian stood beside her. "Do you want to talk to him?" She shook her head. If he wanted to talk, he had years. Sebastian didn't argue. He simply switched off the monitor. 3 days later, another problem landed on Adrian's desk. A major institutional investor postponed signing a financing agreement. The explanation was brief. Pending clarification regarding ownership disclosures. Adrian immediately called the investor. "We've worked together for 6 years." "We have." "So what's changed?" Pause. Questions. What questions? The kind that appear when lawyers start freezing assets. The call ended politely, but the message was unmistakable. Confidence was slipping. That afternoon, Brielle walked into Adrian's office carrying coffee. "You've barely slept." "I'm busy." She placed the cup on his desk. "This Adeline situation. Can't you just settle it?" "I'm trying." She hesitated. "Maybe you should apologize." Adrian looked up. "For what?" Brielle blinked. "You disappeared while she was giving birth." The single word stunned even her. For the first time since their affair began, Brielle saw something she hadn't wanted to acknowledge. Adrian didn't just neglect people. He genuinely believed they would always stay. Across town, Adeline sat in her father's library reading financial reports Sebastian had gathered. She wasn't searching for revenge anymore. She was searching for answers. One report caught her attention. Several transactions had been approved using investment entities connected to her original trust. She frowned. "I never authorized these." Sebastian nodded. "That's why we froze everything." She closed the folder slowly. Adrian may not even realize what's been happening. "Maybe," Sebastian answered. "But someone inside Wells Meridian Capital certainly does." Adeline looked toward the window. For the first time she began wondering whether Brielle had ever been the real problem, or merely the distraction hiding someone else's game. At that exact moment, Sebastian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then looked at Adeline. "The forensic accountants found something." "What?" Sebastian took a slow breath. "It isn't just your marriage that's in danger anymore." He slid the report across the table. "It looks like someone has been moving money through Wells Meridian Capital for over 2 years. And Adrian's signature appears on every authorization." Adrian refused to believe the report. There has to be a mistake. His chief financial officer remained silent. The conference room felt unusually cold. On the screen behind them were dozens of transactions that investigators had flagged. Every transfer had been approved under Adrian's executive authority. Every approval carried his digital signature. "I never authorized these payments," Adrian said. The CFO finally spoke. "The signatures are valid." "Then someone used my credentials." "Find out who." "We're trying." For the first time since founding Wells Meridian Capital, Adrian realized something terrifying. He was no longer in complete control of his own company. Across town, Adeline met Sebastian and the forensic accounting team. Boxes of financial records covered the conference table. The lead investigator pointed to a flowchart. The money wasn't stolen all at once. It moved in small amounts over time. Sebastian folded his arms. "So no one noticed." "They noticed. The investigator looked directly at Adeline. They simply assumed the transactions had executive approval. He slid another folder across the table. This account received most of the transfers. Adeline frowned. The company name meant nothing to her. What is it? A consulting firm. Who owns it? The investigator took a slow breath. On paper, no one. In reality, he opened another document. The beneficial owner was finally revealed. Cordelia Wells. The room fell silent. Adeline looked at Sebastian. So it wasn't Brielle? Sebastian nodded slowly. No. It started long before Brielle appeared. That afternoon, Sebastian made one decision. We're informing the board. Adeline hesitated. If this becomes public, it will. The only question, Sebastian interrupted gently, is whether the truth reaches them before the rumors do. She nodded. For once, let the truth go first. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following morning. Adrian barely slept. Neither did Cordelia. Mother and son spent most of the night calling lawyers, public relations advisors, bankers, anyone who might contain the damage. By sunrise, they had a strategy. Deny everything. Delay the investigation. By time. It had worked before. It didn't work this time. Every board member had already received the forensic report before entering the room. No one smiled. No one exchanged casual conversation. The chairman opened the meeting without ceremony. We'll begin immediately. He looked toward Adrian. Did you authorize these transactions? No. Can you explain why your signature appears on every approval? I believe someone accessed my credentials. The chairman nodded. We considered that possibility. He pressed a button on the conference table. Another document appeared on the screen. Security logs. Every approval had been completed from Adrian's office using his biometric login on days he had been physically present. Adrian felt the room closing around him. I don't remember signing these. One director finally spoke. Not remembering isn't the same as not doing it. Then the conference room doors opened. Everyone turned. Sebastian Caldwell entered first. Adeline followed. She wasn't wearing designer jewelry or a power suit. Just a navy dress and a calm expression. She looked nothing like someone seeking revenge. She looked like someone finished pretending. Adrian stared at her. You finally decided to show up. Adeline ignored him. Instead, she handed another folder to the chairman. This contains correspondence between Wells Meridian Capital's legal advisors and my husband's office. The chairman adjusted his glasses. Several minutes passed as board members silently read. Then one director looked directly at Adrian. What exactly is an Adeline exit strategy? Adrian froze. His face lost all color. He slowly turned toward Adeline. You read that. I lived it. No one spoke. The silence became its own accusation. Cordelia suddenly stood. This has nothing to do with company finances. Sebastian answered before anyone else could. It has everything to do with company governance. He pointed toward the report. The proposed divorce transferred financial exposure to my sister while shielding certain executives. Another board member frowned. Are you suggesting someone intended to use Mrs. Wells as a liability shield? Sebastian didn't answer. He simply looked toward Cordelia. That was answer enough. The chairman closed the file. I've heard enough. He looked around the room. As of this moment, Mr. Wells is placed on administrative leave pending completion of the investigation. Adrian stood so quickly his chair slid backward. You can't suspend me from my own company. The chairman's expression never changed. You founded this company. You don't own the board. One by one, the directors raised their hands. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in his professional life, Adrian had lost. Not to Adeline, not to Sebastian, but to the consequences of decisions he believed would never catch up with him. Outside the building, reporters were already gathering. News had spread faster than anyone expected. Cameras turned as Adrian stepped onto the sidewalk. Questions came from every direction. Did you misuse investor funds? Is your wife cooperating with investigators? Are you resigning? Security hurried him toward a waiting car. Across the street, Adeline watched from Sebastian's vehicle. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, only relief. Sebastian noticed. I expected you to be happier. She smiled faintly. I didn't want him destroyed. I wanted him to stop destroying everything around him. Sebastian looked out the windshield. I think that already happened. Adeline glanced back at Wells Meridian Capital. The building still stood. Employees still walked through its doors. Business would continue. Only one thing had changed. The illusion was gone. As they drove away, Sebastian's phone rang. He listened for less than a minute before ending the call. What now? Adeline asked. The investigators just interviewed Garrett. What did he say? Sebastian looked at her carefully. He admitted someone ordered him to stay silent. Adeline frowned. Who? Sebastian handed her the preliminary statement. She read the final line twice. The order hadn't come from Adrian. It hadn't come from Brielle. It came directly from Cordelia Wells. And according to Garrett, Adrian had never known. 3 weeks later, the investigation was over. The results were exactly what the board had feared. Cordelia Wells had quietly created a network of consulting companies that billed Wells Meridian Capital for work that had never been performed. The payments had been approved using Adrian's executive authority. Some approvals had been signed by him. Others had been inserted into document packages mixed with legitimate contracts. He had failed to notice. The investigators reached a simple conclusion. Adrian had not designed the scheme, but he had allowed an environment where no one questioned his decisions, not even himself. That failure cost him everything. The board accepted his resignation before federal regulators became involved. Cordelia resigned the same day. Neither of them left the building through the front entrance. Garrett testified before the Internal Review Committee. He admitted Cordelia had instructed him to stay silent whenever unusual transactions appeared. If Adrian asked questions, Garrett said, I was told to say the finance department had already verified everything. Why didn't you report it? Garrett lowered his head. I was afraid of losing my job. The committee chair nodded. Fear explains your silence. It doesn't excuse it. Garrett never argued. Life moved on far more quickly than Adeline expected. The divorce was finalized without a courtroom battle. She asked for nothing beyond what legally belonged to her. No public interview, no television appearance, no attempt to embarrass Adrian. She wanted peace, not headlines. She and Levi remained at the Caldwell estate while rebuilding a life that no longer depended on someone else's promises. Some mornings she walked through the gardens pushing Levi's stroller. Other mornings she had breakfast with her father, talking about ordinary things they had missed for nearly a decade. Slowly the distance between them disappeared. One afternoon Harrison smiled across the table. I spent years waiting for you to come home. Adeline looked at Levi, laughing in his high chair. I think I finally did. Wells Meridian Capital survived. The board appointed an interim CEO. New compliance procedures were introduced. Independent audits became mandatory. The company lost money. It lost prestige. But it did not collapse. Hundreds of employees kept their jobs. Adeline was grateful for that. None of them deserved to pay for choices they had never made. Almost 2 months after the investigation ended, Adrian requested one final meeting. Sebastian asked Adeline if she wanted to refuse. She thought about it, then quietly shook her head. One conversation, no more after that. They met in a small cafe overlooking the Hudson River. No reporters, no lawyers, no security. Adrian looked older than she remembered, not because of time, but because certainty had disappeared from his face. For a long moment neither spoke. Finally he broke the silence. I know an apology won't change anything. No, it won't. He nodded slowly. I thought success meant never slowing down. I told myself everything I did was for our future. Adeline stirred her coffee. Somewhere along the way our future became your excuse. Adrian lowered his eyes. I didn't know what my mother was doing. I believe you. His head lifted in surprise. You do? Yes. She met his eyes calmly. But you still chose not to see what was happening right in front of you. He didn't argue because she was right. He hadn't questioned the missing dinners, the lonely doctor visits, the unanswered phone calls, the vacation, or the divorce papers. He had accepted every shortcut because it made his own life easier. I lost my company, he said quietly. You lost much more than that, Adeline replied. You lost the people who trusted you. The words stayed between them, heavy, impossible to deny. After a while, Adrian reached into his coat pocket and placed something on the table. A tiny pair of blue knitted baby socks. I bought these before the trip. I forgot to pack them. Adeline looked at them for several seconds, then gently pushed them back. Levi has everything he needs. Adrian nodded. I figured. He stood. I won't bother you again. As he turned to leave, Adeline spoke one last time. I hope one day you become the father he deserves. Adrian stopped walking. Without looking back, he answered softly, I hope so too. Then he disappeared into the afternoon crowd. She never saw him again. Years later, Levi would ask about his father. Adeline never lied, but she never filled his heart with anger either. She simply said, your father made choices he couldn't take back. So did I. The difference is I chose to learn from mine. On Levi's first birthday, Harrison handed Adeline a small wooden box. Inside was a family photograph taken decades earlier. Her parents, Sebastian, and a little girl laughing at the camera. You kept this, she asked. I kept everything, Harrison smiled. I just hoped you'd come back before I ran out of time. Tears finally filled Adeline's eyes, not because she was grieving but because she realized something. The family she thought she had lost had been waiting for her all along. That evening, after Levi had fallen asleep, Adeline stood on the balcony watching the lights across Manhattan. A year earlier, she believed happiness meant keeping a marriage alive no matter the cost. Now she understood something entirely different. Love without respect becomes dependence. Success without integrity becomes greed. And forgiveness without accountability becomes permission. She had nearly traded her dignity to preserve a relationship that had already ended long before the divorce papers appeared. Looking back, she no longer hated the day Adrian left for St. Lucia. Without that trip, without those photographs, and without the envelope waiting in her hospital room, she might have spent years living beside someone who saw commitment as a business arrangement. Instead, she walked away before losing herself completely. Sometimes people think the greatest revenge is watching the person who hurt you lose everything. They're wrong. The greatest revenge is building a life where their absence no longer feels like a loss. That was the life Adeline chose. And looking back, it was the best decision she ever made.